We welcome you to this conversation on UnlockSharedSavaari on the importance and challenges facing shared mobility in India's rural transportation landscape. I am Chaitra Naka, a research associate at the Center for Public Policy Research, Kochi, and today I have with me Dr. D. Dhanuraj, our chairman, to talk about this topic. So, when we talk about transportation in India, we often use highly urban lens to understand it. We talk about metro rails, highways, and electric vehicles. But India is also home to more than 6.5 lakh villages that accommodate more than half our population. Can you elaborate on the rural transportation scenario in rural India?
See, India's focus on public transport has been largely on metros. In metro cities for last many years, we all know that either in the form of a metro rail or in the form of starting from January and trying to the smart city, we have buses, public buses being introduced in the cities to cater to the demands. But whether they are meeting the demands or whether they are satisfying the commuters' requirements or commuters' demands, this is something that we need to discuss separately. Now, coming to the rural side, the reason I started by mentioning metro rail and infrastructure development and buses in cities is that it's the only time we hear about public transport augmentation in this country today. Hardly anybody talks about rural, and there could be multiple reasons for that, because nobody actually give any focus to the rural transport in all these decades. Maybe because I could see few reasons for that. One could be rural areas were not economically, they were poor, and it was not growing the way cities were growing, and everybody in the system will say that cities are the growth engine, so that is where you have to put more money and augment the infrastructure. Where in rural area, poor farmers, if I could say that why should they have a good connectivity? But things are changing. Things should have changed much faster and probably years back. But our studies show that rural areas have been largely neglected in this country, and rural areas, even though we have more than 60% of people, Indian population lives in rural areas, we are not discussing the availability and accessibility or affordability of this public to an efficient and robust public transport network. There could be one more reason other than the poverty. That was the main reason many were citing, because when I operate a bus at public transport mode, there would not be sufficient number of commuters onboarded to this service. But I believe it is beyond that particular point of no commuters debate. It is about who are the service providers in rural areas. The service providers of public transport historically in India or at the state level is a state transport undertaking. The state transport undertaking, almost every state transport undertaking in the country on a huge loss. So their immediate rate of return from the services they are offering, they would like to offer more in urban areas, not in rural areas, because urban areas they have a captive commuting population, whereas in rural areas they are not so sure about it. But adding to this injury or the insult, I would say given the loss that these SQs are making, either they don't have sufficient fleet size, or they don't have the capacity to operate in many places, because you need not only the number of buses, it's also about the staff the support system that they require. That is where I think we should start discussing rural mobility in the country, especially in the context of, from we often hear Prime Minister talks about Viksit Bharat 2047. So if you are planning for or preparing for a developed status for the country, it's imperative that we are providing efficient and affordable and convenient public transport system that could accelerate economic growth, GDP growth, and we've already seen the villages are not poor as we thought 25 years back. So things are changing, but in order to accelerate that, we need a very efficient public transport system.
Definitely, I definitely agree. And something that we've seen is in the last decade, through the Prime Minister's Gram Sadak Yojana, we have increased connectivity by over, I think, close to 90%. But at the same time, as you said, the services or Mofussil services provided by the state undertakings has only grown by, I think, about 10% from the data that we have. So in this context where connectivity is improving, but public transportation services are not growing at the same pace, we run a danger that people can go, but they don't have means to go to places. So that in some ways leads to increasing private vehicle ownership. But that only works in maybe communities that have the means for it, but there are still a lot more communities that will get left behind. For such communities, for communities where it is probably not feasible for you to run a bus service, as we were talking, what do you see on ground?
No, there are multiple challenges here. If you look at the existing rules, regulations and framework that is applicable to public transport framework in the country, whether it is rural or urban, there are multiple challenges. And these challenges are more deeper in the case of rural mobility as far as we discuss this topic. The challenge number one is, of course, STUs are operating, so STUs are on a huge loss and they don't have the fleet size, or you don't have the, many of the states in India, or if you look at nationally, if you go by the global standards, most of the estimates say that, show that we require another 400,000 buses in order to meet some of the global standards like 40 buses per 1,000 population, 40 buses per million population. But that is not a, if that is a case, that is a poor supply of bus fleet in this country, then you can imagine how bad it is going to be in rural side of the country. But that is where 60% of the Indian population are living. Now, coming to a question of who will provide, how will we overcome these challenges, I think what we require is we have to go away from the conventional thinking. The best model that I could imagine or visualize is what we discussed, the last mile connectivity in urban areas.
Same model.
Same model could be deployed or it could be introduced in rural areas. My issue with all development talks and conversation happening in this country today is, for example, you mentioned about Prime Minister Gram Sadak Yojana. If I am not wrong, from 2000 to 2025, we have built more than 7 lakh kilometres of road. So everybody is interested in ensuring a better infrastructure. That is, of course, is imperative for a developing country, and we should have better roads and infrastructure. But nobody then talks about who are going to use it, how are they going to use it. And if this road infrastructure is meant for the rural folk, that is why it is called Prime Minister's Gram Sadak Yojana. But what way they are going to use it? We don't have the bus fleet, or we don't have any other provision, we don't have any other mode that is serviced on these roads. That is where I believe model like shared mobility could be more apt and relevant for the rural areas for a few reasons. One of the reasons that STUs are always whenever we talk to STUs about what about their service provisions in rural side, they say that there are not many commuters. They don't know the fixed commuting population or captive commuting population. That means that if they operate, this is the justification or the excuse that they give, that if they operate a bus, a 40-seater bus, they will have only few people sitting in the bus and going to nearest town, right? But the operational expense is same, whether you have 40 or 4, the operational expense is going to be high, so that it is not financially feasible for them to operate these buses, provided they have sufficient number of buses. That's a different debate. Now, how to reduce the cost? So one way of reducing the cost would be this: reduce the size of the vehicle, so that operational cost will be minimal. In order to achieve that, again, we have a very wonderful model in South Asia, Southeast Asia, where we have shared mobility service. So you have wonderful roads, or I would say we have wonderful hardware, but we don't have a software. That is where local, it can also lead to generation of employment. Think about it. We have 7 lakh kilometers of road ready in this country, the rural side, I'm not talking about the urban side. And if you can bring for every kilometer one vehicle, and every vehicle will have at least one driver, that will generate 7 lakh employment opportunities overnight, right? And this also can lead to one more aspect. This could be a local, probably an entrepreneurial revolution happening in the country. I think governments are very much, they're worried about the entrepreneurial activities in rural area. I think there's a demand. So it is like many other, products and services that we avail in urban centers. There's a demand, but the existing provisions, rules and regulations are not permitting to have shared mobility in rural areas. So what we are trying to do in this particular campaign that the CPPR is launching is to convince policymakers that there needs some tweaks in the existing policies at the state level. More or less, I believe at the national level, the Motor Vehicle Act is open to this, have shared mobility or different modes of mobilities. But the state level, we see that your legacy problem, either it's because of a legacy problem, historical reasons, they have not changed their mindset. Even now, when somebody is operating a shared vehicle, either on rural or urban, it could be termed as an illegal operation, right? That can create lots of problems, because when you are commuting and you are using, you are commuting sitting in somebody else's vehicle, but there is a trust factor, there is a safety factor, there is a comfort factor, and these factors are not getting improved in this country because of the existing challenges in the present regulations. When your regulations are right, when this operations become illegal to legal in its in the Latin spirit, I would say, then it can actually explode into a billion market opportunities. It starts from manufacturing to user to designers to makers of this vehicle, and it could also probably bring a revolution in terms of employment. It can also bring more finances too, because you think about it, if somebody is going to finance these 7 lakh vehicles, let's say one vehicle for every kilometer, that's a huge amount of money that will be pumped into the local market. So there are direct and indirect, or I would say positive externalities, as well as a direct impact on the quality of life in rural areas by having shared mobility.
I think the point about employment is something that really needs to be considered, and something that a lot of state governments will find attractive. Beyond the employment potential, I think we should also consider how it will benefit the communities and themselves, and having access to a means of transport that is available at higher frequency than say a bus that only runs say 3 times in the day. That will also change the kind of opportunities that these the people that in rural areas that don't have regular public transport can access. I just want to talk about, so we've been talking about shared vehicles or shared Savaari. So what are these vehicles, what do these vehicles look like, and how do they operate? Maybe very briefly, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
So, my first insight to this whole idea was some 15 years back when I was leading a research project in Chennai, where we looked at auto rickshaws and share autos. What is the role autos and share autos are playing in Chennai's larger public transport framework? And interestingly, we found out this is about urban Chennai. Interesting thing that we found out in that project was one, auto rickshaws. When we conducted the study in 2010, there are around 1 lakh auto rickshaws plying on Chennai streets. That means around 5 lakh families, or 5 lakh family members are depending on the livelihood earned by these auto rickshaw drivers. That's the economic side of the. But more interestingly, we found out that in Chennai, in the order of preference or the volume of commuters use different modes. We have suburban train, we have MRTS in Chennai, we have MTC, Metropolitan Transport Corporation. So we were curious to know in our field research to know where the auto rickshaws are positioned, right? And we found that in 2010, on a particular day, Metropolitan Transport Corporation carries around 5.4 million commuters, that is 54 lakhs. Then you have suburban train, that's from Chennai Beach to Tambaram. They take care of around, 7 lakhs or 8 lakhs per day. Whereas in autos and share autos totally combined together, they carry around 2 million or 2.2 million. So that means this is a private entity, whereas all other entities are owned by the state. But how much respect we are giving to the auto rickshaw drivers, how much respect that we go to the auto rickshaw ecosystem as such, right? And we treat them very poorly. We don't think they are part of the larger public transport system. So from that time onwards, I think we've been discussing, debating the idea of shared mobility. So coming particularly to the shared mobility in Chennai, Chennai, I think in 2009, early 2000, they had some 200 licenses were given for some reason. Then it was increased to some 400 or 500. I'm sure this has been revised after so many years. But they all play a major role, because when we conduct interviews to public, this is applicable to rural, that's why I'm sharing this backstory. People are so comfortable, they pay some 5 rupees or 10 rupees, commute from one place to other place. It's like a mini bus, right? They stop, and in Chennai the good part was that they stop wherever you want to get down or get into autos, right? But there were some fixed routes and corridors they operate. Now, after 15 years, I think we are getting into rural mobility debate based on that study, actually. But all these years we've been carrying out research and understanding about how this is done. And the challenge here, so you asked me about what is shared mobility. Shared mobility could be an auto, it could be it could be any small vehicle. Popularly in India, in southern India, it's all share autos, right? But if you go to Rajasthan, for example, there's something called Alwar Seva. They modify the vehicle. If you go to Pondicherry, you can find a different set of vehicles, style of vehicle, which are again they can carry 10 to 12. It's an extended auto rickshaw. In Chennai, they modify auto. They will place 1 or 2 seats in between so that they can carry more, even though legally it is not permitted. So what does it show? It shows that there's a huge demand for these kinds of operations because it's very financially feasible, economically it is feasible for everybody. But the idea of share auto or shared vehicle is also from the fact that if you do look at any picture, since we are talking about autos as an example of share auto, share vehicle, shared Savaari, auto rickshaws has not changed the last, let's say, 60 years. Right? So significant change I can't see. In between, we could see Tata Magic has come. Tata Magic is not an auto; it's a 4-wheeler. It's not a 3-wheeler. So there were some attempts by some companies in India to come up with new vehicles and all. But while we conduct the research last many years, when we talk to different manufacturers, they said that there is no incentive for us to put more money for R&D to modify the existing vehicles like autos, because the legal system doesn't permit us to do that. Because the system doesn't permit somebody to buy this vehicle and operate. It's not like they are not permitting the manufacturer, they are permitting manufacturer. Of course, there is no role for the rules to stop a manufacturer to put more money in R&D, but there is no incentive for them. So that's the reason auto rickshaws of 1960s and let's say 2020 would look same, right? Because it's a 3-wheeler, shape is same. In East Asia, South Asia, Sri Lanka, you say tuk-tuk and all is made different, we call them in different contexts and by different names. So the very idea of this shared Savaari concept could be legalizing this and also encourage the innovation on the type and category and style of the vehicle that we all see. So shared mobility is very simple. You have those who to help the viewers to understand auto. When we hire an auto, typically it's your personal service. It's a personal service. You commute from your house to your nearest mall. That means that you give 60 rupees or 70 rupees to cover some 3-4 kilometers. Now think about a system where the same auto is shared by a few people and they may get in or get out at any point in time in that course of one trip, right? That is what you call shared Savaari. So what will happen, what is the benefit for the commuter is, if you are traveling 5 kilometers paying 60 rupees as your personal service, then in a shared service, since there are many more passengers, the 60 rupees will be divided among them. So at the end of the day, you are still covering 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers, paying 15 rupees or 20 rupees. The other thing from Chennai and other cities, what we are seeing is a lot of innovations happened in the local market, where I've also seen air-conditioned shared Savaaris. Think about a situation where your buses are not air-conditioned, but your small autos are air-conditioned. They have closed it. And they probably charge you extra 5 rupees for that. But still it is very comfortable. But we want to make sure that these are all legal. So once it is legal, it can ensure more safety to the passengers because it's bounded by various regulatory aspects. But today, the rules are not even ready to accept and consider these models or modes, so that the larger public are at the loose, they are at the loss.
It's an interesting observation, and to think that these vehicles can be innovated. We can have different kinds of smaller vehicles that serve people, just like how our regular public transportation buses serve.
Yeah, I cited these urban examples because even in urban centers, they charge only 15-20 rupees. So think about a situation where you go to rural and if they charge only 5 rupees or 10 rupees for your ride, who are the beneficiaries? The larger public in this country have benefited from that. And more than that, there are a lot of positive externalities. There are access to market, there are access to education, there are access to health facilities. Because today, many are suffering because you don't have the money to buy a personal vehicle, and that increases the cost of living. And more than that, they spend a lot of money in order to even to go to a nearest market to get some food grains or their groceries for their weekly usage, and your education, because your grocery will cost you only probably 100 rupees, but one trip may cost you 250 rupees, right? So this we need to avoid, and people will have more disposable income by saving their expenditure in transport. That's a beauty of this local, small, shared Savaari.
Thank you for tuning into this conversation. Shared mobility is already a part of how India moves. The question that remains is how policy and regulations will recognize and integrate it into the mobility networks of India. Through UnlockSharedSavaari initiative, we document how these vehicles operate across India and how they can fill transportation gaps in our rural and urban settings. If you rely on shared mobility or experience transportation gaps, please visit our website sharedmobilityindia.com and share your experiences. Thank you.